Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Dunn. I predominantly use he, him pronouns, and I'm the executive director here at the New Haven Pride Center. And I'm super excited to welcome you to our last day of Pride panels for Pride New Haven, kicking off with our first panel of the day, which is on Rainbow Capitalism, a topic that is something that is very heatedly debated in our community, and something that we definitely need to continue to talk about more because it happens a lot. But before we begin, I do want to do a quick land acknowledgement. So before we begin today's program, we'd like to take a moment to honor the land on which we're hosting an event. While this event is virtual, the New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, the Manshatucket Pequot, the Eastern Pequot, the Shattuck, the Golden Hill Pawcatuck, the Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. I invite you to please take a moment to acknowledge the land and honor the Native people whose land you occupy and the history of the place you're in. You can learn more about Native lands by visiting native-land.ca. As I said already, today's event is part of Pride New Haven. Pride New Haven runs through Sunday, so you still have a couple more days to hang out with us, including tomorrow for Pride Fest. There's over 25 events this year for Pride, so there's literally something for everyone. And you can visit newhavenpridecenter.org to see all the information about this year's programming and events. We do like to thank our presenting sponsors of Pride, which include Gotham City Cafe, Healthcare Advocates International, Black Rock Social House, Partners Cafe, Circle Care Center, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, the City of New Haven, and the State of Connecticut. Speaking of Rainbow Capitalism, today's program is specifically also supported by a grant that we get from CT Humanities. But with that, I'm going to stop talking because nobody came here to listen to me, and I'm going to invite our amazing moderator, Dom, to the virtual stage to get us going. Thank you, Dom.
Hello. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, attentive internet queers in the audience. It makes sense that this is the last day of panels because this panel is going to be climactic. I just want to introduce, or rather allow our panelists to introduce themselves with their names and pronouns. We're going to have a really short overview of some of the concepts and language we use to talk about rainbow capitalism. And I suppose I should model those introductions by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Dom. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a writer and an organizer. The brunt of my work for the past 10 years has been around queer liberation and housing issues. There are way too many intersections between those two, and I've had brief and powerful vacations in the realms of anti-carceral work, and a lot of trauma work too. So yeah, I would love to pass it off to some of our panelists just so we can see who we're working with today.
Hi, my name is Andy. I am a social worker and, more importantly, a queer small business owner working out of New Haven. In my social work, I actually develop nonprofit client management tools for the elderly and disenfranchised in the Connecticut Fairfield County area. But otherwise, I do Queerly Departed, which is a very small 3-person team with some extra help doing spooky merch for queers and bi-queers and taking the stance of queers need to make more of their own stuff.
Jason, tell us about yourself.
Certainly. My name is Jason Hayes. I've spent the last nearly 3 decades as a celebrity hair, wig, and makeup artist based out of New York City in the mediums of film, television, and theater. I am currently the creative director for Prideful, which is a non-gender specific cosmetic and beauty line launching in October in the United States and Canada and Puerto Rico. I'm also the founder and organizer of the Disarm Hate Movement, which I created just shortly after the murders at Pulse in Orlando. Thank you. I'm very proud to be here with you all. I'm now a Connecticut resident. So this mission is very important to me.
Amazing. And Sasha, if you're able, Sasha was having some mysterious internet connectivity issues, but I love a little suspense during a live event, so I'm excited.
I think, no, that time I just forgot to unmute myself. But my name is Sasha. I use she, they pronouns. I'm just the New Haven girl. I don't know. I've been involved in organizing since I was in high school, and I feel like mostly around maybe queer politics and Black politics and art and labor practices in regards to art. But yeah, not much else to say about me.
There's actually a lot I could say about you, and considering the environment, I won't, but I disagree. Okay, so I just want to give us a working definition of rainbow capitalism. I encourage both our panelists and the audience to jump in to expand or interrogate the definition that I've provided. So rainbow capitalism refers to the commodification of the queer struggle for equality by corporations. This is really visible during Pride Month. Frequently, corporations engage with queer or allied consumers by appropriating queer language and symbolism, like the rainbow. Rainbow capitalism is by nature profit motivated and skin deep. What I mean by skin deep is that corporations will often make these minor or nominal contributions to LGBTQ causes, but which are undermined by major donations to anti-gay lawmakers and or by policies that are openly hostile to queer people. A serious consequence of the major advertising campaigns associated with rainbow capitalism is that they draw resources and attention away from grassroots queer organizers and vendors, like the ones on our panel today. Anything, Jason, Andy, Sasha, that you would add to that, or anything that really stuck out or resonated with you in that description?
I would probably also add things that are pinnacle to and market to queer culture on the day-to-day and culturally through Queer Month, Pride Month, and then at the end they changed your icon back and it's like it never happened. I'm thinking mainly of, say, Disney, things that a lot of queer identities put a lot of stock into as cultures, as important items for them that are very counterproductive to the movement in a lot of different ways.
So fleeting. That is an excellent point. Very, very temporal. Anything else we want to add?
I think for me, I'd like people to kind of take away from this panel that it's not only things that happen with rainbow capitalism that are to the detriment of the community. It's also things that are of no benefit to the community. So something that stays neutral is also just as damaging. So I don't think we can only look at situations where it causes harm. We have to look at situations where it does nothing, because that's equally as painful and as draining on the community and its resources.
That is a really interesting distinction that I'm glad that you made.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful point because it's the same as choosing to do nothing. At the end of the day, that's still a choice and you're putting it in the wrong hand.
Yep.
Right.
And the choice should be mine. It should be yours. It should be theirs. That's the difference. Yeah.
I have some like particularly egregious examples of, oh, psych, it's actually not time for our fun slideshow, but I can see why you would think that. There's just actually so many disgusting examples of rainbow capitalism that I needed both like an auditory and a visual component. So we're on the auditory. I just wanted to mention some examples here. YouTube adopting rainbow social media profiles, despite this recent history of demonetizing LGBTQ content and running anti-gay ads for LGBTQ content. Is okay, there we go. Gilead, if people are familiar with PrEP or Truvada, these are like, this is a medication that can be taken to prevent HIV. Gilead is the pharmaceutical company that developed that medication. They're a major sponsor of New York City Pride. A lot of the money making up that sponsorship is made off of Truvada, which costs $1,500 to $2,000 a month out of pocket, which, you know, again, like doesn't really reinforce the sense of like a genuine or a deep stake in the health and well-being of the queer community. And then there are just like many companies, American Airlines, AT&T, Walmart, among many others, that will signal their support really publicly for Pride, while donating money to anti-gay lawmakers, or they will, I think this is an interesting point to Andy's earlier, that that like rainbow capitalism efforts are really confined within time and space, that a lot of these international companies will signal to like US consumer bases or like Western European consumer bases that they are supportive of LGBT rights, but they will maintain separate social media profiles without any of that signaling for countries that are like less supportive or like openly damaging, have openly damaging laws towards queer people. Gross. But now we are ready for our slideshow. Please, Siani. Okay. I would love a little audience participation here. This is an ad that, oh my God. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Paige. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. This is an ad run by Burger King in Austria. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this picture? Anyone looking at this and they're like, there's something just a little off here.
I think one of the main issues is that instantly you start to play with what they feel is humorous by putting two tops and two bottoms together. So automatically they take it to a lower common denominator and sexualize it. So for me, that was one of the first things. And to be honest, the first several times that I saw it, I was like, this can't be real. This has to be, you know, one of the, and then I was just absolutely horrified, because I feel that there are so many levels when you start talking about corporations of marketing for corporations of this magnitude. There are so many desks that this had to clear that just shows me there are multiple levels of clueless and offensive people.
And that they had no one in the decision making at any of those levels to be like, this joke kind of falls apart, like as soon as you look at it or engaged in the community at all in any capacity.
Yeah. Well, I think it's obvious when you start to look at any campaign, you can tell right away if the members of the community that they're targeting, that they think that they're targeting, have had no piece in the journey that got us to this point where this went public.
Yes. Wow. The relief that is like flooding my body as I hear you guys dismantle this. Yeah. Also sexually frustrating. I'm like,
Yes.
you know, sometimes it's worth a try. If you are like, well, maybe it could work, but definitely I'm like, this does not reflect like a deep internal understanding of queer culture.
The community. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Can we move to the next one? Cool. This is on just Donald Trump Jr.'s social media profile. Anything that bugs you about this image?
Taking terminology and not even acknowledging it and the point they're trying to make. Like, you can't just put a quasi rainbow and a term and then make it about not even the community and be like, I did it, guys. Give me points now.
Yeah. The entire presentation from top to bottom is actually repulsive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, I honestly don't even think that I want to give it airtime, because I find everything about the image itself and its content, as well as its content creator, to be, you're never going to find something redeeming that's worth having a conversation that would even elevate the situation or the person. So I think it's, yeah.
Sasha, anything you want to add?
It's actually kind of camp. Like, I don't know. I'd probably wear it ironically. No.
How can I get you this sweatshirt without giving money to Donald Trump?
I'm kidding. No. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, it's just silliness. It seems kind of, yeah, I don't want to give it too much. I don't know.
Yeah, I think something that feels a little sinister about this to me as I'm looking at it again, I'm like, oh, this is a type of like erasure via displacement. Like this acronym has a specific meaning that is being replaced by like
something
another
they
meaning.
obviously deem more important than what it originally means.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, I think it was a way to hate on two things at the same time. That was the entire purpose.
Very energy efficient in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that I only included 3 of these images, because I actually am not sure that we can sustain the level of like revulsion that we have right now. So let's go to the last image. Okay. So this was an Instagram post that the Marines put out. And I have like actually no idea if this is a viable place to store hollow tip bullets like in your helmet.
No, it's not.
But but they are rainbows. So,
and the tweet leaves out that queer people could be in the military. Let's not even talk about military as a function of society, but they could serve in the military without saying that they were straight for less than a decade, and that didn't even last in totality. Like,
yeah, I think there is that like erasure, a lack of acknowledgement for history, this like history of violence and exclusion by the military. I think for a lot of queer people, they don't identify the like values and causes of like queer liberation with the values and causes of like colonialism via like military domination and political manipulation by the military. So I think this image would be a lot of, would just be like pretty jarring and frustrating for a lot of queer people, me included.
I would even say there is an additional insult level to, for whatever reason, voluntary or through, capitalist conversion, the queer people who did join the military, that this would be very offensive to them because this is not mirroring their day-to-day lives or experiences while they were in that institution, or even an acknowledgement of most of the time they couldn't even say they were queer until after they were discharged.
Well, it's the hypocritical stance in the actual words that we're looking at that I find the most offensive, because you're sitting here and you're basically talking out both sides of your mouth, because at the same time, if you're trans, everything we're talking about here doesn't apply to you in the military. If you're openly gay, everything we're talking about here doesn't apply to you in the military. So it's okay if you want to come and die for us, but other than that, we don't want to know anything about you. And I think that's really the biggest problem, is that it says equality with dignity and respect, but for everyone, but that's not what any of this stands for when you step anywhere past the image and the text itself.
Yeah, like as soon as you leave their Twitter feed, this falls apart.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's really the biggest problem. If anyone is looking to join, I think, and defend us, then I think why should they not be treated with the equal respect on every level? Sasha, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's fine. I think there's also something to be said about like imperialism and like using like if you care about queer people's rights, if you care about gay people's rights, then like you're not going to demonstrate that by bombing queer people and trans people in other countries. And I think sadly, I know a lot of people around my age or younger who are deeply invested or interested in the military because of their predatory marketing. And for a lot of people, like not just queer, it is a great avenue to get access to healthcare, stable income, and all those things. And so, yeah, like you might die. You can also go to college. You'll also have access to probably some of the best healthcare in this country, without having to worry about whether or not you can afford to even call an ambulance. So
that's so real. I am so glad that all of you are here, because these are really, these are important takes. We can convene the group therapy session later where we just continue like dismantling various manifestations of capitalism and its iconography. We will be meeting in the Chili's parking lot, but we're going to use the rest of this time just to try to talk like constructively about like what we can do internal to this community to like replace these toxic structures. There'll be more dismantling too, don't worry. But I thought maybe we could start just by hearing from Sasha, Andy, and Jason about what is your relationship to labor, and how has like gender and sexuality, how have you experienced that in the workplace, whether blue collar or white collar, if you can draw a distinction between the two?
For this area, do you want to round robin us, Dom, so we don't talk over each other?
Yes, and Andy, I think like having showed some initial like energy, I'd love to hear from you first.
Sure. So I'll start with the first one. My relationship to labor is a very privileged one. Like I get to work a white collar job that gets to fund my side projects and my side interests. It gets to support, 3 queers in a place where a lot of other queers aren't in the same position that I am. And I do want to acknowledge that. And even, I am vending at Pride, like I go into it knowing that in that vending space, I am more privileged than a lot of pieces where those artists, that's the only way they get their income, that they need to either fly under the radar enough to keep their interests communal and outside of the queer community, where I don't. Like, I get to call myself queerly departed. I get to go to events that I choose because I think they're interesting, and that if people walk right by me because they don't want to engage with our name, then that's fine for me. I don't have to worry about that lost revenue, even from like an artist level, let alone the fact like, I get products made, etc. Like, that's an inherent relationship that needs to get acknowledged.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
I think I've seen this from several different angles in my 50 plus years doing this. I think one of the first things that was kind of shocking to me was working in the film and television industry. And I watched the fact that I was gay and did hair and wigs work to my benefit, because I watched it be used to elevate me in the selection process over women. And it was something that was not lost on me as I was going through this. And I think that that's something that you have to acknowledge, which is something when you and I spoke earlier this week, Dom. I think, I'm also very cautious of the fact that people say, you always have something to say, you always have an opinion. I said, yes, because my privilege affords me that. And I would be very, very lax in my social responsibilities to both those who come behind me and my community if I didn't use that privilege to benefit those who don't have an audience created so easily. I will always be a white cisgendered male before I will be a gay guy. And that's something I have to understand, because that does give me power, and it's my choice where I choose to use it. And I choose to take it past the keyboard phase. And I think that's very important. And I think that's what I'm going through now, as we are now trying to bring a non-gender specific queer driven brand to market. It's that education process that we're going through with buyers, with retailers. And I will say I am very happy to see that the younger generation, who are the first people you kind of deal with on that level when you're trying to bring something to market, are very accepting. There's an excitement. There's also a sense of, well, I don't understand why you're pitching this so hard and explaining it so well. This is a conversation we shouldn't even be happening. Of course I love this. This is how it should be. So I think I have a lot of faith watching the younger queer generations and our allies be so forward thinking.
Jason, something I really appreciate that you marked for us is just the presence of like labor relations, that capitalism sets up these hierarchies across identity that are like inherently have these power differentials in them. So it's interesting that you can occupy so many different like power positions simultaneously, or maybe not simultaneously, but
sequentially, like you orbit in all of these different ones in the various areas you focus on.
Yes. Sasha, what is your relationship to labor?
I just want to comment really quickly that I think a lot of young people don't really understand the need for these conversations or think that they're important, because so much is like because of the erasure and because of just the constant miseducation that people go through, which is why it's important that we have these conversations and like actually like give people access to like what happened during the AIDS crisis and other stuff like that, like, but anyway.
Wait, can I just ask, when you say this like miseducation that other people are experiencing, I would love to just hear a little more about what you see as part of those miseducation.
I think young people aren't like, or like people like growing up, like just like historically, are not taught these things in school. We don't learn these things in history classes. We don't, nobody talks about these things. If you can afford to go to college, you might take a class that might tell you something about these things, and then you have to look into it yourself if you want to get any deep analysis or understanding of it. But it would be too embarrassing for this country to admit some of the things that it's done to its citizens. So I think it's easier to just like not discuss things like the AIDS crisis or like any other issue in reference to like racial stuff, and I think I think that's the case with a lot of
Totally. I
things.
mean, I think that there's, sorry for interrupting you, but I'm the moderator, so I can do it at least once for each of you.
No,
Yeah, I agree. I think that the education system like definitely has a vested interest in not teaching people how to recognize like labor exploitation.
And I think they even to add on to Sasha's brilliant point is they have a vested interest in making it seem like a personal issue rather than a class one, right? How many people in the community do you know that don't have a steady job, that don't have access to the privilege that a lot of people do, either by education, funding, familial access to money, things like that, that are all seen as personal issues? It's, I couldn't get my life together, which is why I'm working at Dunkin' Donuts at 31, not, oh, queer people aren't allowed to have jobs that are powerful, or intersections with race and historical community notwithstanding, right? Like that is its own thing of, well, we disenfranchised the African American community for centuries, but we want you to see it as a personal problem, not the fact that we did it.
Exactly. And I think that, to Sasha's point, I think the AIDS crisis was intentional. We know that. We know what was done to the queer community was a selective choice. And I think that what we also have to, as we look behind us to the AIDS crisis and we look forward in front of us to the youth, I think we have to understand the fact that that was also a choice to uneducate LGBTQ queer youth. And by that, I mean, I cannot have a conversation with a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old because when I try to impart our history and where we've been and what we've been through as someone who it's part of my lived experience, it comes off as a parental lecture, because due to AIDS, we lost that middle generation that would have passed it on conversationally. So we have that entire void that would have carried that through down the generations. We lost a whole section of our history as well as our history tellers. And I think that both of those things were intentional.
Oh my God, this is like a separate panel that I really want to do with all of you, is about like just like queer generational learning and about like reinstalling that infrastructure and those queer elders. It's something that I think about all the time. But
I agree.
Okay. No, I'm so sorry. I'm just like, I thought that I could just interrupt Sasha and then it would be fine.
And we would let Sasha continue, but no.
Yeah. So I just want to like deliver this conversation back to like Sasha, like where, yes, please, Suyani. Like where have you been in the workforce? What is your relationship to labor?
I mostly work, I guess, blue collar and freelance jobs, and I don't know, they're kind of just, I tend to just keep my head down and focus on doing the work. I feel like I deal with enough with just being like Black, and when I came to terms with being trans, COVID had started and I had like been like kind of like laid off. And then I realized like, oh, I don't ever want to go back there because I wouldn't be able to be like myself there. And since then I've kind of been working freelance, which is stressful in like just like money management stuff and like book figuring out how to like book. I do like interior painting, so figuring like how to, I guess, like do ads and stuff, and paying taxes as when you're working freelance. Lots of things that are really stressful, but I find I think part of why it's easier for like queer people, or like less stressful for queer people to do gig stuff, is partially because, like, at least in my experience so far, that people kind of like bother you less because they don't care about you, you know, like, and so it's kind of just like, here, do the work, and then like leave me alone. Like, I don't really care what you are, what you look like, versus having like a boss who's like hovering over you. They're kind of just like, well, whether you say you're a girl, you're a boy, you're this, you're that, I don't care. Just paint my house. And like it's not, you know, it's not necessarily like, sometimes, you know, I worry about safety depending on like whose house I'm going to and like the type of person they are. But it's like, it's a different kind of stress than like, you know.
It's not institutional stress.
And somebody
individual
hovering over your
stress.
head and trying to tell you what you're supposed to look like and be and do, and like all these like little things that are about like disciplining you into performing gender in the way that they want you to, versus, again, like freelancing comes with its own issues, and like being regulated to gig work is fucked up. I shouldn't, I don't know if I can say that, but but it is, it takes that stress off, at least, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, for better or worse.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who work, when working through gig work, say that there are different stresses, but there's a level of safety that they do feel, because if it is horrible, they haven't agreed to be there for 3 years. It's that short window, so they can literally see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think that that's terrifying, because we're setting members of our community up with no safety net. And I think that's really terrifying. And I think that's something that we as a community need to start focusing on.
And not only no safety net, no training. It's like, okay, yeah, if gig work's safer for you, but we're not going to tell you how to do your taxes still. You still got to do that on your own.
I think the problem with gig work and like, stuff like that is also, like you said, like, like I don't really like, there is no safety net. Like there is no access to healthcare or things like that, you know, like it is kind of just like, I'm making this work as best I can, and if it falls apart, like it falls apart.
And everyone will blame just you.
Yeah, versus like having like being a part of some like larger institution, having some larger structure that I can participate in, or that people can participate in. And so I say it with that caveat that I don't think it's like good, but I think that's why it's, or like prostitution even, like I feel like, again, like lots of money that like a lot of like queer and trans people get from this, but it's not good, it's not great, like
it's not safe money,
it's not safe. You're risking your life every time.
Exactly.
But like, you know, that versus working at, again, like, you know, Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, like where you could be making like $1,000 a night versus like, or even more than that, but like, you know, versus like being mistreated, and, you know, like at least you're going to be mistreated either way, but like at least you're making a ton more money, I guess, is how people feel, unfortunately.
So there's this like polarization where like queer identities are being appropriated by corporations to make money for corporations, while simultaneously like actual queer people are being shunted off into these like darker corners of the economy, like gig work and sex work.
Less regulated, less requirements of taking care of them as people and seeing them more as commodities, or you know, just doing the work, as everyone has said, without any of the things that capitalism says jobs should provide you.
Totally.
That allows them.
No,
that
no, no.
allows them an out, because if you fail, or if something traumatic happens to you, or if you are a victim of a hate crime, well, you shouldn't have been working in sex work. Or
yeah, you should have been saving your money. You didn't manage your job well. You didn't get insurance.
It's victim blaming. Yep.
I want to pivot again. I think we've established that rainbow capitalism isn't working, and that corporations can be pretty untrustworthy advocates for the queer community. I'd love for us to explore a little bit, like, what would meaningful support look like from corporations? What would meaningful support look like internal to our own community? What would that support look like from allies who
So
want to help?
So this brings me back to what I wanted to say when Sasha brought us to our first tangent, right? Which is part of the thing we lost when the AIDS epidemic happened was an acknowledgement of things we have already done, right? Like in the 70s, we successfully did a financial boycott in Florida to repeal gay laws that were being in place there. Like it was big enough that, you know, that's where Harvey Milk started. That's where a lot of like queer moments in history happened, but they have since been wiped out, right? Like, and we have this environment where everyone finds the queer dollar appealing and understands that it is powerful, because otherwise they wouldn't be marketing to us. But the community itself hasn't seemed to realize that. And they need to. We need to say, all right, well, if they're going to market to us, that means we're important enough to market to. That means if we boycott, we're important enough to be listened to.
Yep. I think the two things that we desperately have to start educating our community on, that come from their core power, is the fact that we need to do more than just be on the keyboard. That gets us absolutely nowhere. The other thing is that the power behind our dollar matters immensely. So yes, it might be because we've now become a nation of convenience. I can look at it today and have it this afternoon, or I can look at it today and place my order and I will have it tomorrow. And I think that so the boycott concept falls short with quite a few people because, well, I just need this one item. I just need, but they're $4 cheaper. And I think so we lose that push, that drive in mass because of convenience, and because a lot of folks can't get past the social media warrior phase. And I think that's to a serious detriment to the community.
Yeah, like just as we've lost or have been taught to unlearn the powers of union, the powers of striking, the powers that making things inconvenient is how things actually change. It's the same with our dollar. Like the only thing they care about is convenience, not even from an end user point, but from a, well, they're going to get money from us. So if we make it inconvenient for them, things will actually change.
Yep.
Jason, before you move on, I know from our conversation earlier that like Prideful has proposed, I think, like a pretty unique answer to that question of how can we generate support from corporations that is more directly impactful, that has more to do with the lives of queer people. I wondered if you wanted to speak to that.
Sure. I think one of the very first things that was important to us as we were bringing Prideful to vision was that we made sure that we took the time to educate the consumer as well as the retailer. And that can be exhausting. Like I said, I'm of an older generation, and I feel it is my responsibility because I can't be angry with someone if I don't also allow them the same energy that I would put into that anger, if I don't put that same energy into educating them. So with us at Prideful, it was important because we wanted something that was 365 days a year. We wanted a home for the community. Now, bath products, hygiene products, cosmetics, and the message behind Prideful are places where we spend our queer dollar. Those are necessity products as well as some luxury. And we're putting our money into that market already. But I wanted several things to happen. I wanted it to be a home. I didn't want it just to be a couple of bottles with the rainbow. I wanted that message to be there constant, non-gender specific. I wanted to see my trans brothers and sisters. I wanted to see community of color represented within the LGBTQ community. But I also wanted to make sure that those were the voices talking about the products, that we were also not going down that typical beauty industry avenue of pay to play with bloggers and influencers who've never even touched half of the products. So it was very important. So what we did was we created a map of the United States, and our map is not red, nor is it blue. Our map is rainbow. Anywhere on the map of the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico where we have a prideful hero, which is someone like you, someone like me, someone like all of us. And what we did was we sent them the products, and we asked them to post videos and talk about it and give us their feedback and their reviews. And in exchange for them talking about that, we asked them to choose local LGBTQ grassroots charities that are actively doing the work in the communities where they live, the real people doing the work, not these nationals where 3 cents on the dollar actually sees the light of day. Past a party or a nice office. So it was important that they were grassroots, and we make monetary donations. So it's actually queer money helping the queer community and then circling back once again. So it expands the real vision of the brand, but it also expands the real voice of the brand, because the people talking about it are actual members of the community who are using it and they're benefiting by it. But it also expands to those nonprofits, because those people are also talking about it because we're helping the queer dollar to support them. And I'm proud to say that 2 of our Prideful heroes have chosen the New Haven Pride Center as their charities. So yes.
Can I backseat and ask Sasha, as a community organizer, her thoughts on what we're talking about right now?
I think the problem with Rainbow Capitalism is capitalism, and I will not capitulate to it in any way. I don't think corporations can do anything meaningful. Frankly, I think we can definitely, I feel like anything we can do with them or in this structure is triage, and that's great. But ultimately, we need real organizing, and movements that actually again work and aren't capitulating or just about opportunists or people who want to present themselves as influencers or whatever it is. I feel again, people forget what organizing, real organizing looks like because of erasure, and mistake a lot of people who are literally just basically the equivalent of Instagram and internet influencers, and capitalists or whatever, as people who are doing the work. And I don't think that's the case. And unfortunately, because there's no real meaningful movements or organizations, I feel it feels difficult to say that, or wrong to say that. I don't want to discredit anyone, but there's no nothing really there's nothing really doing the type of work that used to happen, is what I mean, that was really galvanizing and getting stuff done. And I think we work that takes a long time, requires historical analysis and things grounded in information that people don't have, or again feel maybe too busy or pressed for time or resources for. But I think the type of work that I'm talking about takes years to create, and requires people have said, spending time and doing the work with people face to face in your community, and not just yelling on Twitter or whatever.
This is beautiful. I would have ended it there anyway, because I'm like, this is the moral. But I also want to make sure that we have some time for any questions that anyone listening in might have. So yeah, if you have questions, please drop them in the comment section.
While we're waiting on that, I'd just love to throw out there for thought, one of the problems we do face now here in 2022 is that we have very limited brick and mortar retailers to choose from with our gay dollar. When I was a kid, if you didn't want to go there, you could go there or there or there or there. There were 20 of these mass retailers that you could select from. So you could choose where your money went. And I think we've lost that. So I think part of that is kind of where the power shift happened with Rainbow Capitalism for Pride Month, because we were very limited. But I think now, because we have become such an e-commerce society, I think we need to start sourcing out and sharing the information of LGBTQ and queer businesses and those that are true allies, because that's where our money starts to make its impact.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think that is maybe even a new role for pride centers in the role of this, right? Because the first thing when I moved to Connecticut was, all right, I need a new doctor. How am I going to find a queer-friendly doctor? I happen to be in Connecticut where there are options for that, so it wasn't, inherently difficult like it is in many other places. But the first thing I did was, all right, well, have people done this before? Are there queer directories for the state of Connecticut? And what I found was there are, but they're really out of date. They're not really vetted. They're not really maintained. And that creates they're not useful for anything. Then I kind of just have to go out on my own and find it for myself. Having a queer directory, having here are your queer options for your queer dollar in these categories, I think is the next step in this.
Yeah.
Biz, what a beautiful question. Thank you for that. I'm going to answer it first. This is the second time that I'm pulling my moderator card. The question is, what is your dream future for queer economies? Maybe one of the very few things that I miss about the more active and Baroque part of the pandemic was there was a lot of conversation about mutual aid that I hear much less of now. I think that there's something so exciting about the creation of these networks and this infrastructure for people to meet each other's needs that completely sidesteps a capitalist economy, and those and the extraction of labor feels really exciting, just from a personal perspective. My partner is a trans woman, and trans women have typically way less access to the resources they need. So a mutual aid network for trans women could provide electrolysis services for free. It could do sperm analysis and deep freezing so that you can transition without having to pay for preserving your genetic material, so you don't have to choose between having a biological family later on down the line versus being able to afford your transition now. So I think really identifying in dialogue with our community, what are the needs that are most intrinsic to our survival and to our cohesion as a community, and how can we meet those together outside of this structure? Feels very dreamy. Yeah, anyone else? What are a dream future for queer
I
community?
don't want to take too much time. Mine would probably be, here's what would be a requirement to get to my dream, which would be universal access to healthcare that wasn't mandated by state or employer. It would remove capitalism from a major component of basic human life and decency, and would allow a lot of our community in, economies or otherwise to be able to function and not be reliant on, I can't come out because of my job, I can't transition because I don't have health insurance.
I think for me, the dream economy comes down to two words, and that's visibility and acceptance, because everything comes from those two things. Because before you can accept me, you need to see me. And I think that the minute you have visibility, then we step into acceptance, which then steps into conversation, which then triggers change. And I think that's really what I think any dream has to have, because you have to have a process. And for me, that's really where we start to see the ripple. And there's an incredible saying, I always go back to it, probably like the last 35 years. Wise men plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in. And when I was working to organize Disarm Hate, everyone was like, I don't understand why you're fighting so hard. That's never going to change. And what I always say is, maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm planting seeds today, because it's the only thing that I can control. Is how I step forward when something I feel is wrong or needs to be addressed. That's all I have. And I think so for me, it's visibility and acceptance. Those are the two things that I see as the future of queer economy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe just to ditto Andy a bit, it would be healthcare and like affordable housing. That's what people need. And like I feel like if you knock those two things out, and like I don't have to worry about, I or the people I care about or know don't have to worry about being homeless, or like whether or not they can afford like the procedures or surgeries or whatever it is that they need, that they feel like they have to prostitute themselves for, or whatever it is, like if those two things were taken care of, I feel like everything else could fall into place. I'm sure I'm missing something, but like I don't know, like after that, like I can't say I'd want for more personally.
Yeah, like universal healthcare was a dreamy enough solution, but with Key with Sasha, like UBI, universal basic income to assure housing. If you could get the first level of needs met, then who knows what you could do.
We are past 1 o'clock. I just want to say I am so grateful to all of our panelists, Andy and Jason and Sasha. This has been like incredibly energizing and illuminating for me. I want to give you a second to just like any final words, a sentence that you might want to leave people with, like any follow-up that you want people to take, or just any concluding words.
Those are hard.
Yeah, I'm fresh out.
Great, then let's just cut it. And thank you, listeners. That was the perfect closing question. I appreciate all of the support moderators that we had. Biz and Andy, really helpful. Okay, great. If there's nothing else, then have a beautiful day. Go to another Pride event. And then just keep being your gay self for the rest of the year.